It's the one that's online. I must have accidentally transposed the numbers. It's whatever is posted online is the schedule that we have to go by for the final exam. So I apparently, chalk that up to the second mistake I've ever made in my entire life. I was listing the final at the wrong time on your syllabus. So yeah, look at your online, for those of you that are going to take the final or want to take the final. Look at the time that's online that's posted. The final is, well, all the exams are optional. You don't have to take any of them, but if you are happy with your score, you are more than welcome to not take the final. It will, of course, be the one that is comprehensive and is a collection of the questions that you've already seen. So what we'll do today is we'll talk about personal selling. We've already had one lecture on personal selling from one of our sales students that came in and talked to you from the advanced class on some of the advantages of personal selling. We'll talk about personal selling and its role in the business, and also looking at those social styles and how they impact personal selling. Then I will go over the fourth exam with you, which will be on Thursday, this Thursday, so that will be the fourth and final exam of the regular semester, and then we have the final exam during finals week. So from time to time, students ask that come from other colleges that transfer in, do you have to come on the days of finals week if you don't have a final? For example, what is the final in this class? Is it Tuesday or Thursday? Tuesday. It's Tuesday, so obviously you don't have to come on Thursday. If you want to, you're welcome to come. We won't be here because it will be all over the client as I try to post grades. So you don't have to come for the Thursday of finals week. As the text notes, a lot of the students and marketing scholars who teach selling pick up on this quote that everybody sells something. Again, you should be able to explain the entire world from the perspective of your discipline. And so just like those branding scholars said that branding is the most important decision that a business will make, people who study sales and like salesmanship tend to think that everybody is a salesman. We all sell something, and that's true. We all sell something. If nothing else, then we sell our labor so that we can get a job and support our families and things like that. So we all sell something. And yet, as important as that is, one of the things that we have a hard time with when we talk about the sales program is that people will say, well, I want to get a business degree and I want to be in marketing, but I don't want to go into sales. And why do you think that is? That we have this sort of pejorative opinion about sales? Why do you think that we have this sort of negative attitude about sales? And so a lot of people will say, well, I want to go into business, I want to be a businessman, but I don't really want to go into sales. Why do you think that they say that? They don't want to cold call. So you do have to kind of be a rejection junkie. That is the number one thing, if you take my sales class that we talked about, it is the hardest thing for salespeople to deal with is this idea of rejection. And one of the things that you have to separate out is that they're not necessarily rejecting you. It's not a reflection on your own self-worth. It may be that you're not selling the right thing to them. Why else do people not say, I don't want to go to sales?
I hate feeling pushy. You
hate feeling pressured. And where is it that we have this really negative experience with sales? Car dealers, that's it. Yeah, everybody who's ever bought a car has had this feeling coming off the car lot that maybe they got taken advantage of. And one of the top salesmen that I listened to a speech by once years and years ago said, everybody loves to buy. We love stuff, but we hate to be sold. We hate to be sold. We don't like that feeling. And so you go into a car lot and you get this high pressure tactic. And so what we try to focus on in our sales program is convincing students that A, everybody's going to sell something. If nothing else, you're going to sell yourself. And B, that we're not necessarily talking about car sales. Where's another place that people have an overwhelmingly negative experience with salespeople? How many of you have been Mathis Brothers? And was that an overwhelmingly pleasant experience? Probably not. Why? Because it's that high pressure, it's that sales model that we talked about when we talked about those philosophies of selling that, sell hard and fast and make the close. And so we now talk about an inverted pyramid. The old sales model really spent very little time up front. It was a pyramid structure, and you spent very little time up front with your approach, and then, some time presenting, and then closing was, close long and hard. We now say that what we do is we spend a lot of time at these initial levels and less time at closing, because it makes closing easier if you spend more time doing things like prospecting and figuring out your customers' needs and wants. And so this idea of engaging in value co-creation is becoming enormously important. A number of years ago, I was listening to NPR on my way into the university, and they came on and they said that 75% of the jobs that are in existence today are probably going to be taken over and made non-relevant by technology in the next 15 to 20 years. And I was really, really ready to challenge that idea. That really 75% of the jobs that we do today are going to be taken over by technology in the next 10 to 15 years. And then I went to Sam's to pick up the groceries for my business, and I ran across this thing. How many of you go to Sam's because they give you samples? How many of you eat at Sam's once a week? You go to, pick out all the samples and you eat at Sam's. They now got this thing called a free ops. So I was listening to NPR and I was thinking in my mind, this can't be right. They're not going to get rid of that many jobs in the next 10. And there I go. And we've now eliminated jobs that people used to have at Sam's with this thing that passes out free samples. And so one of the things that makes a sales career attractive is that it's harder to eliminate, particularly in the business-to-business world, it's harder to eliminate that human touch. And sales is one of the fields that is not retrenching and is not losing numbers. We're actually seeing an increase in the number of salespeople, and they're enormously important. They are a critical part of the business role, and so it's one of the places where you really can get a good job. And it's one of the only majors that we can say both our majors and minors on the campus have 100% placement. Yes, sir.
But the person who's stopping that.
Yeah, but it takes far less time to stock one machine than it does to have a whole bunch of people out there passing out samples. And so, we're even seeing technology take over those things. And sales is one of those areas where we're not seeing the loss of jobs. And so you might want to think about it. There's lots of advantages to a sales career. And one of the things that they talked about, one of the things that the sales student came and presented on was this idea that you have an opportunity to really set your own salary. One of my friends who's a salesperson for US Food says, this is the only career I've ever had in my entire life where I can decide if I want to make more money this week, all I have to do is do what? Get out there and hit more of my customers, and make more presentations and get them to try new things, and I have the ability to set my own salary. So it's a really good career choice for a lot of people. Selling and marketing plays three major roles. It's the critical link between the firm and its customers. And in this role, it creates solutions for customers. And so we focus on this idea, again, in this post-modern world, we focus on this idea of value co-creation. The sales force is the company's eyes on the world, their contact with the outside. Bring the ideas back to the company that are important in terms of what trends are out there and what is it that people are demanding. And so that's a critical role for firms. And then it plays a dominant role in the marketing program. And your text tells you that a lot of CEOs actually have significant sales experience because it is sales and marketing that makes the money for the firm. They're the ones that actually make money and are out there generating revenue, and so it's enormously important. We've talked about this idea of going from these various eras into a relationship model, and on 520 they talk about this idea of relationship selling. The relationship selling really is about building ties. And so again, going back to this old model where it was you make an approach, you make a pitch, and then you close long and hard, versus this model where we focus on really learning about our customers and understanding them and spending a lot of time in those early steps preparing for those understanding of the needs of the customers that becomes really important. And then there's also partnership selling. And this is where you really do see value co-creation. And both the customer and the company work together to combine their expertise to create create value for both the firm in terms of selling to the customer, but also in providing unique solutions that the customer needs. And your text gives you the example of IBM. IBM has a goodly number of people that work, for example, in information technology that are actually out working at Charles Schwab and providing various technologically sophisticated solutions to the problems that their customers face with regard to providing financial analysis. At the company that I worked for, we did this. When No Child Left Behind came along, it radically changed the way primary and secondary ed was operated. And companies or schools needed to understand how it was that they were going to deal with the pressures of accountability that the Bush administration had imposed on them through testing. And so it was our approach to team selling, which has become a big thing in the marketing era, to going out and really working with the school districts to identify the deficiencies that they have. And there are all kinds of different school districts out there, and their needs are radically different. What might be a difference between the needs of, say, for example, children in the Edmond School District versus children in Oklahoma City Public Schools? What are some of the differences that you might think of there? What's Edmond's socioeconomic status as a community?
High.
It's very high. It's the highest per capita income in the state, in their population. That population of school children is radically different than a kid who comes from a school district that isn't as affluent. And so understanding those creative solutions and working with them through team selling is really, really critical. For the test, you should know the forms of personal selling. There are order takers. These are generally not the ones that we focus on in our sales program. They're the ones that go out and take orders from customers. They generally are dealing with already established customers. They don't do a lot of problem solving or a lot of initiating of creative solutions, but they are important, particularly for a lot of those companies that sell in the business-to-consumer market. Order getting, this is what we might think of as being sales in the conventional sense. You're going to identify prospects. And this is becoming easier with social media. Learning about them, finding out what they need, and engaging in that sales process at a more complex and rich level. Customer sales support, these are important. So when we were choosing insurance companies for the company that I worked for, they have these support people. There was a sales guy that came out that sold us health insurance packages for our employees, but he also had somebody who was a claims specialist that worked with him. And again, this is how these team and collaboration between people in the company can be very important. And what she did is she made sure that we understood what the claims process were and then worked with us after we had bought the policies for our company in handling the claims of our employees that were having problems. And so they don't actually engage in direct sales like the sales guy did, but they support that role, and it can be enormously important. Your text talks about missionary salespeople. This is the pharmaceutical industry. A lot of times pharmaceutical reps don't necessarily sell, right? Because who is the customer that's going to buy the product from the pharmacy? Well, it's going to be the patient, but they make contact with doctors and educate doctors and other healthcare providers on the drugs that are available, nurse practitioners and physicians assistants, things like that. And then, of course, team selling involves highly complex sales that are technical in nature. The personal selling process begins with prospecting. And this is one of the areas that is the most difficult for a lot of salespeople because it involves what? Something that we all hate. Research. It involves research, getting to understand who your customers are, where they're at, what they need, things like that. But it's becoming easier because one of the things that's making it easier in this highly interconnected world is what? Social media. And it provides a rich field for you to learn about and find your customers through things like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and all of those social media type things. Then planning, once you've identified prospects, planning in the pre-approach so that you can identify and weed out the qualified prospects. Then approaching. One of the things that's an age-old adage that we say, and it's still true, is what? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. It's really important. And so along with this, and with the presentation, come this idea of these social styles that we talked about. How many of you filled out the social style survey that I gave you? All right? What do you think I am in terms of that social style? Yes. You think I'm a driver? Yeah, I'm a driver. Absolutely. Every time I take the test, I always come out. I become more and more of a driver. So, understanding that a lot of the people that you're going to work with, and one of the reasons that maybe we don't like salespeople, particularly those that are at Mathis Brothers or the car lots, is because they don't necessarily focus on and they haven't learned how to deal with different social styles. Only 1 in 4 people that you come across is going to have the same social style that you do. Other people are going to have radically different social styles, and so understanding that becomes critically important in this approach and then in the presentation. So amiables. Amiables are people that like other people's company. They are more of a listener, though, than a talker. They find comfort with other people and listening. They're patient, but they're slow to make decisions. In difficult situations, they may lack confidence or conviction. What kind of social style would frustrate them or is frustrated by amiables? Drivers. Why? So amiables are highly responsive, low assertive. If you look at the opposite of that, the driver is low and responsive and high in assertiveness. They're task-oriented. They expect efficiency from people around them that they come into contact with. They place little emphasis on building relationships with other people. They can be perceived as being aggressive, uncaring, especially by amiables. They like clearly defined goals. They're committed, they're determined, and they're risk takers. So when you approach the driver and what kinds of things can you do, and one of the things that we talk about through our sales program is understanding the environmental cues that you're getting from your customer as well. So what kinds of environmental cues do you think drivers are going to have? What was it that made you think that I'm a driver? Okay? Right, exactly. Well, why would you think that I was a driver?
Because that way you are definitive in what you want, your goals, just drive on.
Today I had to feed horses, right? So I'm dressed in jeans and cowboy boots, but most of the time, what do I wear? A business suit, right? Because I generally think that people should recognize that I'm a lawyer and not be caught unaware. Bad things happen to you with my presence, right? No, I'm just kidding. But you know, that's sort of my personality. Even down to the tie, bow ties are far more, and one of the things, I love them, but one of the things that they tell you is that they actually have a bad impression of a lot of people. They are off-putting to a lot of people. Why do you think that is? Showing. It's more odd than just a regular tie, right? I like them because if you go to court, you have to wear a tie, and if you're going to wear this superfluous item of clothing, it might as well be completely superfluous. That's, I mean, what's the purpose of a tie? There's no purpose to it, really. Huh? Yeah, but I mean, it's long ago lost its purpose. What was the historic origin of the tie? What happens to your tie, those of you who wear regular ties, not bow ties, like the gentleman on the third row from the back? What happens when you go to lunch with a tie? Yeah, food gets on it. That's what ties were originally for. They were an article of clothing to cover up the shirt. Right? Do you really need that anymore? No, we're not eating with our feet at the table. Right? So, if you're going to wear a completely superfluous item, yeah, I mean, that's sort of the visual cues. If you go into somebody's office and they're wearing a suit and tie, you might start to think that they're a driver, and understanding that. Expressives, highly responsive and highly assertive. Expressives like the company of other people, like amiables. They oftentimes get along well with amiables because they're more expressive, right, than the amiables. Amiables complement them well, unless the expressive becomes too aggressive and then it would be off-putting. They're people-oriented. They like to be the center of attention. Positive. They're emotional, talkative, enthusiastic, and dramatic. So with regard to Expressives, how are you going to approach that? With a driver in your approach, in your presentation, you probably want to do what? Get to the point, right? How many of you watched, there's a spoof out on the old show that was a popular television show called Dragdown. How many of you have seen the spoof movie that came out years ago on the show? There was a character, I think it was Dragdown, where he says, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts, that's all I want, this detective in the series. That's the driver, right? I just want the facts, just get to the facts and tell me what I need to know. Expressives and amiables, with regard to your approach and presentation, you're going to have to do what? What? Slow down, make more small talk, show more interest in them, things like that, right? Analytical are low responsive and low assertive. Analytical people can appear unsociable, especially the amiables and expressives. They seem serious and indecisive. They tend to look at matters all over, mull things over for a long period of time, ask a lot of questions, and ask for a lot of details. So understanding these things can really help you not only in a career in sales, but also social stuff can help you in your relationships with other people that you come across, your friends, your family, on a day-to-day basis. So making the presentation, then closing, and then following up. This is critical. One of the things that you will find, and one of the reasons that you have a different experience with this car dealer than a lot of others, is they do provide service after the sale, and service is really, really critically important anymore. So you'll find this dealership from Dallas who sells Cadillacs. Anybody know who they are? Actually, you'll find their cars in Oklahoma. A lot of people will drive down to Dallas, Fort Worth area to buy from Sewell Motors because the experience is so good. They are really good at those customer relationship building. And so one of the things that the guy who started Sewell Motors says, Mr. Sewell, is that the average Cadillac buyer is worth something like $700,000 to him. But if you take into account the number of people that he might refer to them, he actually becomes worth well over $1.5 million. And so that service after the sale is critical, understanding how you build these long-term relationships, rather than just focusing on making your pitch, selling your product, and getting out. All right, any questions about sales? If you want more information on the program, we're happy to talk to you about that. Either myself or Professor Kaiser are the ones that deal with the sales team. It's a really good opportunity for those of you who want to go on and go to competition. If you want to distinguish yourself through your resume, is to get on our sales team, which is a competitive process. We send students to about 6 competitions a year. The school pays for all of that for you to go, and we give you a per diem per day, and it really is a very good experience. 2 of our students just came back from RBI, which was one of the competitions that we go to every year. It's at William Patterson in New Jersey. They both had more offers than they could have ever imagined. I think Jonathan got something like 6 offers, and the other student got 4 or 5 job offers on the spot. So it really is a good opportunity to build those skills. Even if you think that you may not want to go into sales, you ought to at least consider taking the introductory personal sales class, because it really will help you in terms of career planning and understanding all that kind of stuff that you need to be successful at getting a job. Because ultimately, that's the reason you're here, right? Is to what? Get a job. That's the reason you're sitting here on a Tuesday afternoon when you'd rather be out doing something else. All right, so for the exam, if you want, I'll give you a few minutes. I'll put the table over here so that you can put your devices on it. I have to be a buyer this afternoon in the sales lab. So you may want to, if you want to start studying right away, you may want to put your telephones up here or your recording devices, because it's going to take you a little bit longer than I have in the past to get the lecture from today up, because I will be doing that from 2 to 5.
Didn't we? I lied.
I'll try not to walk around again. Should get a good recording. So I talked about a number of books in class for this test period. Two that you should know. A Consumer's Republic is one, and what she talks about in terms of the environment and how we have seen a movement. And I talked a lot about how we've seen a movement in the retail environment. Now we're seeing maybe a back to the downtown area in terms of regentrification and urbanization. So that was Elizabeth Cohen who wrote the book, A Consumer's Republic. And in that she details how social movements impact retailing. One of those things that we talked about was, for example, the political environment and how that can impact on an environmental scan. And I gave you an example of that with the desegregation of schools, how that impacted the retailing environment. And you saw the suburbanization of the nation and where shops moved from the downtown out to the suburbs, to the malls and the shopping centers. And that was largely as a result of Brown versus Board of Education. So these social movements and how they impact business is one of the things that we talked about. You should know the importance of retailing on our economy. For example, things like 4 of the largest companies are what? Retailers. And who are they? Walmart, Target, Costco, and Home Depot. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions that ask you specifically to think about those utilities that are provided by retailers and other intermediaries, wholesalers as well, and how they can be demonstrated. So, for example, there are questions that say things like, a Mexican restaurant offers food made exactly to each customer's preference. What type of utility is that? So understanding and being able to apply those utilities in time, place, possession, form. How we can classify retail operations is important to understand. Your text has a question specifically about Walmart and the impact of Walmart and its size. So you should look at that in the text. Different types of ownership, and which are the most common. How many retail establishments are there in the United States? You need to understand the promotional mix, what all is involved in the promotional mix, advertising, personal selling, public relations, direct marketing, things like that. With regard to that, as I discussed in class, an ad does 2 things that make it great. A lot of the ads that we looked at, one of the ads that I gave you an example of, for example, did one of the 2 things, and a lot of ads do one of the 2 things. They engage the mind of the consumer, but they don't necessarily deliver the selling message. How can the promotional mix be used? How can you use this unifying theory that we talked about? So there's a difference, for example, that I talked about between price, where there isn't a unifying theory, and the promotion aspect of the marketing mix, and how you can use that unifying theory. I gave you some examples of both business and non-business examples. For example, George W. Bush and his use of integrated marketing communication techniques really to have a consistent message among all of the points at which he had contact and communication with his customer. How difficult it can be to change that message once you've established it and rebrand is something else that you need to be aware of. We talked about the process of communication. You should understand that process, what can happen in there. And I gave you an example of that in the book Snowball, where Charlie Munger basically says, what? I'm sorry, I turned my mind off. I wasn't listening to you. Can you repeat the question? What's that called? And of all the stuff that interferes with the ability to, yeah, noise. And you have lots of it, right? Like the stuff that you hold in your hand constantly, and it distracts you. You should understand some of the advantages and disadvantages of all of the promotional mix elements. So for example, what's an advantage of advertising as opposed to public relations? Well, it's control of the message. Whereas if you send out press releases, you may get free from the press, you may get free coverage, but they may not do what? They may not portray it the way you want it portrayed. They may be less than wonderful about it. How many of you watch shows? They release all these products this time of year. And how many of you watch shows on what the latest and hottest product is? That are on the business shows. For example, CNBC and MSNBC do things like that this time of year. And they tell you about what all the hot products are, what people are fighting over, but it may not be the best portrayal of it. You can lose control of the message. So public relations is free, but you lose control of the message. Advertising, what's the disadvantage of advertising? You can reach a lot of people with an ad, television ad, and what can they do? It's expensive, they can turn it off, they can stop listening to it. It's hard to customize. You need to be able to recognize communication errors. There's a question on that. You need to understand the feedback loop. The feedback loop. Your text talks about, and I didn't talk about this a whole lot with regard to integrated marketing communication, but your text touches a lot on Generation Y and how you all are different in terms of receiving the information that you need to make purchasing decisions, and how is it best to try and reach you? What makes you different than, say, your grandparents in terms of the way you gather information? How did your grandparents get information?
Radio, newspaper.
Radio? How many of them read a newspaper? How many of you remember that? They actually read the newspaper. My grandmother would get the Wall Street Journal. She'd actually read the newspaper. Why the hell would you want to read the Wall Street Journal when you can do what? You can get it on your phone. If you want to know something about something, you can do what? Google it. What are some of the objectives of different types of ads? For example, the differences between comparative advertising, institutional advertising. Your text talks about how you go about developing an advertising program and the steps involved in developing that advertising program. You should know that. Types of appeals that can be used and whether or not they're effective. I gave you an example of that. What are two emotions that pervade life? fear and hope. They can be used effectively, right? And so there's a question about political ads that incorporate fear appeals. The use of humor, whether or not it's effective. Your text talks about, with regard to selling, what percentage of chief executive officers have significant sales and marketing experience in their work history. The role that selling has for the firm, how it creates value. What are some of the things your text talks about? You should know this from the text. That are involved in sales, the form of sales, what type of sales jobs, for example. What products are most likely to be sold according to your text based on various types of sales. From routine order takers to team selling, which we talked about. Your text talks about something called the sales engineer. You should know how many stages there are in the sales process that we talked about today. Prospecting, planning, pre-approach, approach, things like that. Be able to identify each of those stages in a substantive way. Are there any questions about this exam? Yes, ma'am.
You said at the end of 2 books.
Yeah, Consumers Republican Snowball. Yes, sir. I don't remember the chapter. It covers IMC, advertising, promotion. Yes, ma'am. Any question? No? Any other questions? There are 50 questions.